So I'm Adarsh, and this is Adam, and we are starting a podcast just talking cricket in general. And as I have introduced myself, and I'm from India, and there's Adam.
Yes, I'm Adam. I'm from Wembley in London, and just a cricket fan. Um, really, just I suppose we got into this just via Twitter. Really, I got into Twitter. Maybe I think I joined February or March this year, and I've been involved in many kind of conversations here. And we decided to. We thought it might be a good idea to do a podcast.
So I'm also there on Twitter, and you can find both of us, me on at Adarsh is it, and him on at Cricket Ref. So I think we should start the podcast topic now, which is Test cricket dying? So we all know that Test cricket suffered a lot over the years, and right now it's at the worst phase we can say over the 180 years it's been through.
Mm.
So what would you like to say about it right now?
Well, it's an interesting thing. I think the first thing is everyone agreed that this is definitely the case, that it is dying, or are we kind of exaggerating things and it's in a good shape? Do you think the consensus is that it really is in trouble?
Yeah, well, I guess for most nations, it
Mm.
is because
Yeah,
if you see for India and Australia and England,
yeah,
those three countries can sustain themselves. But outside of that, I think, well, even for someone like Pakistan, whom you'd
yeah,
imagine to have like fan bases enough to cover, but they are
yeah.
not attracting broadcasting rights from England.
No,
That's
no.
I'm shocked to see. I guess you'd know that they have not attracted even a broadcast deal till now.
No, it's amazing. I've heard that. I think someone was saying it could be because Sky are interested in the women's World Cup, and it's on a similar time. But I'm not
That
sure that's the reason, because I think if that had been England India or England Australia,
yeah.
someone would have got it, I think.
Oh, that could be it, but I think that around the general members like South Africa,
Mm,
Pakistan, they're trying to propose a fund which
mm,
covers about $10,000 for
yeah.
each player, but I don't think that's going to make a difference. I think
uh,
the West Indies sports chairman said that we already pay them more than that. That's chip change in the current world. They're
and
just
yeah,
yeah.
I think it's a very small amount, isn't it? I don't know how much they can really do with that. Um, and the, I suppose you hit on it really, just the disparity between the three. I think sometimes called big three or whatever you want to call them: India, Australia, and England, and the rest. But so, do you think outside of those three, it really is dying?
Yeah, well, I guess it is, and
Mm,
we can look at the results recently
mm,
for
mm.
starts. England beat West Indies 3-0 and Sri
Mm.
Lanka 2-1.
Yeah,
Last game was a bit of an aberration. We can all
yeah,
say that no one expected that to happen.
no,
India beat Bangladesh, and before
yeah,
that also the pattern has been continuing that way, and I don't see that changing soon. My proposal for changing it, as I have elaborated earlier
mm,
in my Twitter account as well,
mm,
it would be that well, have a test window and then
yeah,
and a franchise cricket or a World Cup window. And in the test window, you'd have a specific group of nations, like
yeah,
for the World Test Championship with two
yeah,
divisions, we'll have equal number of games, home and away, with
yeah,
obviously, as you've said, have the runs penalty rule instead of the over rate rule, and
yeah,
have it run for a cycle of 4 years, and
yeah,
then play a 5 match series to end it, not a one match game,
yeah.
and then have a Champions League running alongside to subsidize that. What do you think of that?
No, that's a very good idea. I think it's a radical idea, but I think it calls for something radical at the moment, doesn't it? Because I wonder, is is there any way of kind of saving it by just doing kind of smaller things at first, like when you think about, like, say, the over rate. If you get more overs in a day, maybe more people will watch it. So I think some about 4 or 5 overs are lost in a day at the moment. And
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
had a like an in penalty run, penalty for run, I don't know, like maybe giving six runs for every over not bowled, or the team's run rate for every over not bowled. Also changing the light rule. At the moment, the light rule isn't being used properly. So um, when you look, when it was brought in, it was about danger. Now it doesn't really seem to be about danger. It seems to be just ensuring the best possible conditions for the batters, and that's not really the same. So there's that, and there's also uh, maybe they could be maybe they could be a bit more take more risk with the weather as well. If it's raining or just drizzle, you could start a game in drizzle. I think at the moment they can't start a game in drizzle, but they can continue to play. Maybe a bit more flexibility there. So I wonder if any of those kind of uh, smaller changes would be enough to kind of reverse the decline, or are they too small?
Yeah, you're correct. I guess for now that could be implemented as we've thought. I think a ping ball could be used. And
Oh yeah,
if
yeah,
you saw the India Bangladesh test, there were
yeah,
like 20 overs lost in the first day. That's ridiculous. That
yeah,
just cannot happen, I guess.
yeah.
In
And
the,
that was nothing to do with the weather or anything, was it? They just bowled really slowly, the
and
Bangladesh
for that
team.
and for the weather which you say there can be ping balls used, and for
Yeah,
rain they could just go on with a slight bit of drizzle. It goes on in football. Just
yeah,
adapt to it. Cricket's been adapting for the past 150 years. It's
yeah.
not something new to us.
And I think what it is that their onus is more on kind of what's convenient for them rather than to get play at all costs. So I think they don't really think about the spectator as much. So someone
And
would suggest, "Do you want a pink ball?" And they'll say, "Oh no, what if it swings too much?" Or "Oh no," and it's like, well, so what?
yeah,
um,
exactly.
just deal
And
with it. We paid to watch.
yeah, and as most English fans are complaining now, the ticket prices are too high, and how will people that you cannot get interest in the game if you're going to keep it to a paywall of such
Yeah,
elitism. Like normal
definitely.
people cannot join with with those prices.
Oh, not at all. I think what was it at Lords? 100, £185, I think, for the England
Yeah,
Indians.
175 quid.
Or 75,
That's
yeah. I mean, even this year for the Sri Lanka series, Lords and the Oval, it was really expensive. It was like £150 roughly. Um, but at Old Trafford, I got in for like £29, 30 odd pound, 30 odd pound. I went to three of the 4 days, and it was like 30 odd pound, 30 odd pound, and £29, and that was really reasonable compared to Lords and the Oval. So I don't know if
yeah.
it's just those two, although I think next year for India, the other grounds are charging a lot more as well because it's India, I suppose.
And I think they're just banking on the fact that Indian fans will go, and like I'm
Yeah,
going next year, so they know
yeah,
that we will be willing to splurge for the home of cricket
yeah,
tag, and for
yeah,
that they are just charging overpriced. But they are
yeah,
selling the main people who are going to watch English cricket. That's
mm,
English people living in
yeah,
England.
yeah.
And if you're going to charge 200 quid, no one's going to turn up
No,
after a while.
I think I wonder if it may be mainly Indian fans buying the tickets then.
Yeah, my dad is buying the ticket, I guess, so I'm going.
Yeah,
So I don't know about others, but I'm sure that there are people in England who would be willing to go. So that's not a concern. And what other changes can we suggest? I think there are many little things in Test cricket which are there we can suggest. Like what can there be?
I think.
Do you have any?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, your idea about the window is very good. Even if you didn't do all of your plan, I think there does need to be a window because it's too ad hoc, and the calendar at the moment is too ad hoc. There's a lot of clashes, a lot of overlap, and it doesn't really feel. Um, it's like the test series are rushed. They're like maybe a two-test series in 2 weeks, and that's it. And there's no build-up, there's no momentum or anything, and it's
Yeah,
almost like yeah. I'm sorry.
yeah, you're correct. I mean, if you saw the Sky podcast with
Mm.
who was it, the West Indies Cricket Board chairman, he was saying
Oh
that
yeah,
they are losing around $10 million or something per tour
yeah,
that they're
yeah,
playing. So with that, they just said that there needs to be a collaborative effort,
mm,
and Jason Holder was there, I guess, too, and he said that
yeah,
there needs to be a window, as I said, and there
yeah,
needs to be a pooling of the, like he said that the host board generally keeps all the revenue. So
Yeah.
what they propose is that it will be split 50-50, and the
Oh, that'd
ticket
be good.
sales will also be split 50-50. And
Yeah.
I think that for suppose England's coming to India, well,
Yeah.
England can afford money, but if
Yeah.
they are coming, so India makes a ton of money when England come here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll split it 50-50, not just keep it to ourselves because that's
Yeah.
just unfair. Like
Do,
that, when yeah, go on.
so do you think in a way maybe it's almost too late that the test of the way we watch tests have changed so much that almost it's impossible to kind of revert back to previously. And even if you did share the revenue, which is morally right, I think maybe people still would be less interested in tests anyway, like as a spectator.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess you're correct because the domestic structure. I think more than the fans, I guess the
mm,
domestic structure and the people involved are gravitating towards T20 leagues because obviously they
yeah,
offer the amount of cash which Test cricket cannot rival as of now. And
no,
unless unless there's a radical influx of money by the BCCI, because let's
yeah,
be honest, they control cricket right now, and
yeah,
unless they are the ones who invest not 10 million
mm,
dollars but $1 billion, something
yeah,
like that, is invested across the boards,
yeah,
and the domestic structures are changed and incentivized to play Test cricket. And
yeah,
after that, I guess the marketing bit can be looked after because you can create demand. If you've got a good
yeah,
product, there will be demand. But
yeah,
currently, there isn't a good product for people to watch. And honestly, I don't even think people watch meaningless bilaterals or
no,
those leagues in Dubai. I don't think
no.
anyone's watching that.
Because it used to be the case where people would say, "Oh, I only watch one-day cricket at the World Cup." So they'd say things like, "The actual bilateral one-day series aren't as important. It's the World Cups are massive, but the bilaterals aren't." And it's almost that way in Test now, where people kind of pick and choose Test series they'd watch. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not interested in a two-Test series with with a team that's unfashionable, but I will watch the Ashes. It's almost like that now, where I think even just most bilateral test series are kind of devalued or not really considered as interesting now, I don't think.
Yeah, and that's a question to you. I'm going to ask a
Mm,
question that well, for now what I see is that cricket does not have money. At least people say that it does not have enough money, but 20 years ago from now, earlier
mm.
from now, I don't think there was a lot of money in cricket,
No,
but still some all the boards seem to survive and did
yeah,
pretty well. All
yeah,
people used to want to play Test cricket, and even
yeah,
when ODI cricket used to offer more money than that, I presume.
yeah,
And yet, so what's changed for you at least? Because I have only witnessed Test
mm,
cricket from when it's dying and almost dying. I'm from that
yeah.
era. So for you, what would that be?
Well, I suppose I was lucky enough to watch it in the 90s and tens, 90s, noughties, and maybe tens, you could say. But in the 90s, it was very strong and everyone was really good. It's amazing to look back now, but even Zimbabwe were an excellent side. Maybe excellent is overdoing it, but they had people like Andy Flower, Grant Flower, Heath Streak, etc., and they were the lowest ranked team. New Zealand were ranked lowly, and they had like Chris Cairns and Chris Cairns, Nash, Perore was the keeper. That was a good side. England were ranked lowly then as well, but they had like Thorpe, Stewart, Atherton, Hussain, and then you had a lot of top sides. Like there was a great Pakistan side at the time side at the time with like Wasim Akram and Waki Yunis. Um, the India side wasn't as strong, but it was still good. You had like Sachin emerging and Dravid and Ganguly, and you had the top Australian side, and the West Indies side was just kind of tailing off from where it was. It was like the really dominant side, and you could see it was slightly declining, but it was still good with like Ambrose, Walsh, Lara, etc. South Africa had just come back into it after apartheid, so it made it even stronger. So I think in the 90s it was as strong as probably the strongest it's been really. Um, but I
Yeah.
suppose there was those in those days the series lasted a long time. So I'm trying to think in about 98 South Africa came over here. It was a 5 test series and it took the whole summer. There were no back-to-back matches, so it was like 10 days in between each test.
Oh,
And it was that was the whole summer was just this test series with South Africa. They played a few one days as well, and
well,
then
yeah.
it's just not like that anymore. It's very rushed now, and it's all done very quickly. You don't really build up any kind of I don't know. It's almost a bit like a fast food type analogy. You're just eating it very quickly, and you're not really sitting there enjoying it like you might with a like a three-course
Yeah.
meal or something. And so I think it's a bit more rushed now. I suppose then also there was no T20 or franchise leagues, um,
Yeah,
so that that was something. There was nothing for those two. There was nothing to stop people playing Test cricket because there was nothing more profitable for them to do. Really, I suppose that's a key issue.
you're correct on that. I mean, lasting an entire summer, that's like
Yeah,
they have 50 series crammed into a summer now, so that's
yeah,
impossible for them. I was speaking purely from a financial perspective because
mm,
I think you alluded to that because there wasn't anything else for them
no,
to do in that period, I guess.
no,
Now I think the main issue here is not the infrastructure or anything of that sort. I think that it's the players who
yeah,
charge a lot of money and they want
yeah,
to go business, fly business, which they can get from T20 leagues. But
yeah.
Test cricket, they just can't pay the same amount to the players, and it's ultimately the players going to who are charging that much.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think of what were the kind of distractions for the players then. I mean, early on there was a rebel tour in the late 80s. In
Was
the
Test
80s, I mean,
cricket stopped?
yeah,
Was Test cricket stopped when the World Series cricket was going on and the Rebel tours?
it wasn't stopped. No, they just they continued it, but some people pulled out. Um,
All right.
some people, a lot of English and Australian players just went to play for Kerry Packer. Then they faced the ban and couldn't really come back and play for their country. And also then with the rebel tours, people like Graham Gooch were banned for a number of years for going there. So I suppose that's the kind of these are the only things I can think of that were equivalent now to players leaving just to play T20.
Yeah.
But it wasn't as the Packer thing got sorted out, so that all ended up okay. And the rebel tours there weren't that many, so it wasn't like a franchise leagues, every few weeks.
Yeah, so you're correct. I mean, from that point, I think
Mm,
we can just put that down to the fact that there is nothing in the sport. Like right
mm,
now, there's for tennis, there's no tennis leagues, tennis franchise
no,
leagues. So they are just playing Wimbledon for now. If
yeah,
that crops up, then it may change. So putting that aside, I think there's another problem in Test cricket and cricket
mm,
as a whole that there is no regulatory body.
yeah,
ICC does nothing. Well,
yeah,
they are just they are an event management company as of now. All that they
yeah,
do, and so there is a power vacuum, and
yeah,
different leagues are cropping up. Like if you see the ILT20, this is
yeah,
related to Test cricket in a way that, well, for Test cricket to have a place to survive, there needs to be a body which can look after all the boards that exist, and
mm,
if the ICC is not competent enough to, well, not even go and supervise leagues happening in the Cayman Islands,
yeah,
then,
yeah,
well, how can we expect that they are going to do that? And I guess that for that there needs to be I guess I alluded to a
mm,
point
mm,
earlier where I said that all players from the current playing
mm,
pool can elect a person or a group
mm,
of people who will
yeah,
head the ICC or a new
yeah,
ICC. But
yeah,
as of now, with the power vacuum and of course the betting thing, which I have mentioned to you,
yeah,
which is rampant in cricket as of now. So
yeah,
unless there's some regulatory body which can control that, I don't see that this will change soon. Jay Shah is going to be elected what
yeah,
in November. This is coming soon, and I don't really think he's going to do much. It's just a power flex for his
mm.
future Indian political positions.
How different do you think he'll be to the previous guy, the New Zealander? Is it Barkley?
Greg Barkley. Well,
Yeah,
Greg Barkley, I'll be honest, and this is no disrespect to Greg Barkley, but
yeah,
if you'd see the uh, moment when they were presenting the
mm,
so
mm,
they're standing. Greg Barkley is there with the trophy, and
mm,
there's Jay Shah, and he told Greg to get out, and
oh
just
right,
nicely told him to go out of there,
yeah,
and
yeah,
Jay Shah presented it to him. And if you see the last year's World Cup, Australia
mm,
were presented the
yeah,
trophy not by Barkley but by Modi. So he was
yeah,
just a puppet leader who was put in place. So I don't think that, well, there's going to be productive difference. I just think that Jay will make some inroads like he's
mm,
done to Indian cricket for the
yeah,
show, but nothing of substance. And I think that he's just going to, maybe he's going to install a fund and try to convince people to lose more money. But
Yeah,
I don't see people like Shea Hope or people like what
no,
Quinton de Kock or Trent
yeah,
Bolt getting back on their retirement from Test cricket.
no, no. Um, and then I suppose I think well the England case is an interesting one where they I think Key has sought to kind of he's tried to think one step ahead. I think him and Baz in the sense of thinking if we let the players kind of do what they want in a sense that that is one way of keeping them playing Test cricket and not going off to play franchise leagues. So they can play in the manner they want. Um, and if they get out, there's no stick, there's no criticism. You can just express themselves and make it as enjoyable for them as possible. And then, in the hope that that keeps them involved in Test cricket. I don't know if that actually works in the long run, but it was one. It's kind of one idea, isn't it? To get these
Yeah,
to retain these players.
yeah, that's an idea. But I guess unless you don't have £3 million in the bank
Yeah,
to give
yeah.
to each player, I don't think that's going to work for
No,
South
no,
Africa.
no.
So
That's true.
uh, uh, I was thinking of a point in there. Yeah, so I was saying that could Test cricket exist as some sort of entity, or would it be of some sort of meaning if it was just limited to say India, England, and
Yeah.
Australia, and maybe just South Africa or New Zealand? Would it be of some meaning if that were the case, say 10 years from now?
That's interesting. I suppose yes. It would just be a. I suppose we're almost in that situation now because these countries are playing other countries, but there doesn't seem to be that much interest in it. And it's
Yeah,
almost like when you see with England, I mean, they treat every Test match as a warm up for the Ashes almost.
in India, that's
Uh,
that's surprising to me. Even India.
yeah, it's amazing that yeah, even next year with India, the talk is still about the Ashes, which is a few months after. You'd think at the very least they'd be thinking about playing India at
Yeah,
home, but I think I don't know if you saw that last the team for the last Test against Sri Lanka. They picked Lawrence to open, even though he wasn't an opener, and it was just because they didn't want to kind of threaten Crawley's place in the side. They didn't want someone to come in and give them like a selection headache. And they
yeah,
had
yeah.
yeah,
Go.
and then they had Pope as captain, who had never really captained before, just in that series. I know he was vice, but he didn't really have any 4-day cricket captaincy. They had Wokes at 7, which was probably a bit high, and then they had Bashir as a spinner, who was promising, but probably isn't the best spinner in England. And they had Josh Hole playing, who'd only played 10 games before, and it was like the whole the whole thing was almost like a kind of a
Formality,
warm up
just a
or a net.
formality.
Yeah, and it was like it didn't really matter about that result. What mattered was that if Hull or Bashir to develop for two, a year and a half's time. It didn't really seem that the match itself mattered, even in of itself. So in a way, Test have kind of devalued already, and the games against sides who aren't Australia or India are kind of seen as like second tier tests. Although that's not
Yeah,
reflected in the pricing, they still charge a lot of money to watch them, but
yeah,
they're still even though it's not official, and even though on paper a Test series against Sri Lanka is the same as against India, it just doesn't seem that way. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like a
yeah,
currency. It's like one's devalued and one's at high
yeah,
value.
yeah.
And
I
even
mean, go on.
no, no, sorry.
Oh, yeah. So I was saying that you miss James Vince not being in this squad. That's a
Yeah,
massive thing to not do. Yeah.
yeah,
So what I was saying was that well, there, like you said, Ollie Pope's playing and all that. But the
yeah,
thing is that are there people in England interested? Because in India,
mm,
Bangladesh is here, and there is a lot
yeah,
of hype, and people will tune in and
yeah,
watch the series. There are
yeah,
millions of people who are watching the series.
yeah,
So for here, I think that's there. And if you're going to go to English cricket and discuss it, then I think what I've spoken about earlier as well, that
mm,
they're the only team which I've seen not paying heed to the World Test Championship. Because if you see
yeah,
Rohit Sharma or Pat Cummins, all of
yeah,
them are referring to the World Test
yeah,
Championship almost every day, and it's a goal for them. And well, like India was treating England, and every series is treated, except maybe going to Australia.
yeah,
Every tour is treated the same way here,
yeah,
and it's given
yeah,
importance. And even Australia does that. South
yeah,
Africa, But I think, is it the fans or is it just the administration which is undervaluing the players? Because if it's the fans, then that's the problem.
You know what? I think the you have to put it on Keir McCollum in a sense because there was a time where a lot of fans didn't value one-day cricket, but Strauss and Morgan and Bayliss did, and then the fans got into it. So if it's really up to someone like Keir McCollum to say we take this Test championship seriously. It's what we're aiming for, and then I think the fans would come on board. I think at the moment there's no real talk about it. If you look at when someone gets a job, there's like they've got a name or a criteria for success. At no stage have I ever seen Stokes, McCollum, or Key say the aim is to win the World Test Championship. They talk about the Ashes, talk about being the best side, but they never ever mentioned the World Test Championship. And funnily enough, there was a couple of strange quotes about it. When they asked Broad when England were deducted a number of points, I think it was 19 points for a slow over rate. And they said, well, they're going to take them off you in the World Test Championship. And he said, if they're going to do that, it's not worth winning anyway. And it was like, oh, great. And and it was like, well, that's a bit strange. You can't just because you don't like something, it doesn't mean that the tournament doesn't count. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And I
Yeah,
think Root was
exactly.
saying something similar, like, oh, you can't deduct us points because that will stop. That's going to stop players playing in the long run. That they'll want to just play franchise cricket. Then it was just a bit weird. If you've got the rules here, they apply to everyone, and you, you have to adjust to those rules to win the trophy. And that's the same for any sport, or even if you're playing fantasy football or whatever. You go by the rules that are there and try and
Yeah.
win it. I don't really understand. I don't know, thinking they've got a veto over these things. It's a bit strange.
And let's be clear that we both can agree that the World Test Championship is flawed. There's no
Yeah,
doubt
yeah,
about that. But the
yeah,
thing is that
definitely.
England cannot just say that we are not valuing the rules. They
Yeah,
are there for everyone, and you can play according to that. And I
yeah,
guess
yeah,
and I guess, as you said, their goal is to win the Ashes abroad.
yeah,
Well, I don't personally, I don't see a future where that happens. But just the World Test Championship existing, it you cannot ignore a competition. It would be like India is not going to play a World Cup played in India because that the World Test Championship finals in England. So India just does not turn up to play the ODI World Cup last year.
yeah.
That's what it's like, right? And
It's strange, yeah. And like you said, because the last couple and this one have all been held in England, have been held and will be held in England, and it's like a golden opportunity for England to win it. By the time
yeah,
they take it seriously, the final might be in India
it's
or
gone. It will be
Pakistan or something.
gone. It will be gone from the next time. Jay
Yeah,
Shah said it.
yeah, and then it'll be much harder for us to win it then. So we missed a chance there.
And
I think.
India, yeah, go on.
Well, I just think because we were talking about the decline of Test cricket, the introduction of the World Test Championship was trying to stop that, wasn't it? It was trying to give meaning to
Yeah,
these Test series,
yeah.
and in a way, that idea should be applauded. Like, obviously, the structure's a bit weird. Not everyone plays the same amount of games, etc., which is annoying. But it is a trophy, and well, look, I mean, I know it's new, but when when the 50 over World Cup came out, or when it was 60 originally on the T20, the first few tournaments there, people weren't sure how big it was, but now they're very big, and it could be the same for the World Test Championship. So we could have made the mistake of saying this isn't going to last, it's rubbish, and then like it's still going 20 years later, and we haven't won it, and it would just look a bit bad.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct with that. I think that they should put more focus on it. And
Mm.
I was thinking of something. Well, they are trying to. What was the slogan of Key and McCallum? We are going to save Test cricket. But
Yeah,
if
that's
you
right.
just
Yeah,
but if you're just going to value one series and not even value
yeah,
the competition which was meant to save it, then
yeah,
you're being counterproductive to what you tried to save. You're just saving English and Australian cricket and
yeah,
nothing else.
yeah,
That's all you're saving.
yeah.
And I guess you're not even saving English cricket because you've put a 30-day tournament in the peak of your season. So that's not
Yeah.
helping anyone, is it?
No, no, that's right. I think it's weird because I think someone said that they were. I think it was George de Bell said that the aim of Bazball was almost like it was cricket aimed at people that don't like cricket. It was quite a clever comment in a way, but he was just. It's like their way of saving Test cricket is really to kind of change it in a sense, and is it changed too much? I mean, is is it an approach without kind of any nuance? You just um, come out attacking. Don't worry if you get out. Don't see a bowler off, etc. And then you get it done in 3 days. Is that necessarily saving Test cricket? It's making it more exciting for the neutral for those few days, but I wonder if it's actually saving the cricket in general.
Well, um, well, if I'm going to speak for myself, then
Mm,
I'm watching the New Zealand Sri Lanka game as well. So
yeah,
I'm a cricket buff. I'll watch any cricket that's on.
yeah,
So I don't think it's fair for me to speak. Well, if I'm going to speak from a friend's perspective, which I think is the audience which England and most of cricket want to get into,
yeah,
the 16-year-old who's not really interested in cricket, they
yeah,
want to get them involved. So, their main issue is that unless it's a Border Gavaskar trophy for Indians, or
yeah,
it's a overseas tour to England or
yeah,
maybe South Africa at
yeah,
times, they're not going to tune in because they just say that there's not enough in there for me to see. And
mm,
everyone was watching the World Test Championship final.
mm,
All Indians were watching. All
yeah,
Indians were glued to their screen. But if
yeah,
if a big country in India is not watching, you're not going to attract viewers from the Cayman Islands, even if there's a tournament being played there.
yeah,
So there needs to be some sort of marketing campaign along with, of course, increasing the quality of cricket being played.
yeah,
So we were on the topic of English cricket. I think
yeah,
in that my view on that is that they should be more ruthless, as everyone's been saying for this
yeah,
long. That well, there are periods in which you can attack, and it may excite some people, but there are periods in which you should soak some pressure in.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
in that period, where was it? It was in Rajkot or
yeah.
Vizag, where Joe Root reverse scooped and just gave the series away. Well, in that period,
When
if
Ashton was off the
England,
pitch, oh,
yeah, if England would have just consolidated for
yeah,
what, 20 overs,
yeah,
they would have won the series 3-2.
yeah, yeah. It, and also there was the first test of the Ashes last year where they just went too over the top. They did a really silly declaration on the first day, and then on the third day, or the third or fourth day, I think it was the fourth day because there was a bit of rain. On the fourth day, they just over attacked, and Root got stumped in the end. Brook got out to a strange shot, and it was just too aggressive. And if they just tempered it slightly, um, they would have won that test. But it was I, I get. I think there is something brave about taking the bowling on, dominating. That's really good. But there's also something a bit lax about it in a sense where you go, if you take the Sri Lanka test, the last Sri Lanka test, when it goes wrong, it looks like the team doesn't care. And it might
It,
not be the case, but it just looks like I'm going to play this way, and if I get out, so what? So they,
it's my way or the highway, basically that.
yeah, exactly. And I think with the Sri Lanka one, they thought they were going to make 450, so they came out on the second day and just slogging and kept getting caught, and then he got like 315 or something. And but they still kind of went out and bowled as if they had 450 or 500 on the board. I don't know if you remember. They had all these really attacking fields, and Sri Lanka were like 70 for no wicket off 10 overs.
Yeah, and
And
Nisanka was just smashing them then.
yeah, uh, and then um, and then the next day when they batted again, they had like a lead of 60, and it was like they thought they had a lead of 100 plus, but
Yeah.
they didn't kind of like it didn't compute in their head. They didn't adjust and think, well, it's only 60 now, not 150 lead. So we'll have to temper ourselves a bit. And they didn't. And I suppose that's the downside of it. When it's going well, it is very attractive. But when it goes wrong, it looks very casual and very complacent. And then going along with that is like the kind of interviews afterwards that the players don't say, "Oh,
Yeah,
that
well,
was a mistake" or whatever. They just say, "Well, so what?" kind of thing. And they're not. They don't. I don't think they're meaning to come across as like arrogant, but they're meaning to kind of convey a certain image. But it looks bad. It's like a bad look.
yeah, like Duckett saying, I taught Jaswal how to play cricket.
Yeah,
That's a bit too much. Well,
yeah,
shifting from England
yeah,
cricket, I think if you see overall, like for India, there was Virat Kohli who got in. Like for me, I
mm,
watched Test cricket at the start. I got into it because of him. I
Yeah,
think there needs to be a flag bearer. Like in
yes,
India, he
yes,
was created a media icon.
yeah,
Virat Kohli is a media icon and he promoted Test cricket and everyone's getting along. And
yeah,
there was sledging involved and all of that. It was basically a drama
yeah,
for people to watch. And I don't think that there's an ambassador. Like in England,
no,
maybe it's Joe Root.
yeah,
In Australia, till I think Steve Smith's a bit of a one. And for West Indies, who's the one? Like
no,
earlier there used to be the quartet, then there was Lara,
yeah,
then right now who's there? Shamar Joseph. I don't think millions of
no,
people in the Caribbean are going to tune in for Shamar Joseph.
no, um,
Pakistan's got Babar Azam, and I
yeah,
think he's going to get in a substantial amount of people watching. And
yeah.
Sri Lanka, who's there for Sri Lanka again? Like
I suppose
earlier,
the new Mendes, Camadou Mendes,
yeah, Kamindu
he could be
Mendes
the new,
could
he
be,
could be the new one.
but the boards aren't giving the PR that the players need for
No,
becoming uh, the media icons that they were. Like for Lara, I guess he was there on. He used to be there on big shows, and
yeah,
he used to be there on the front pages of the newspaper. And
yeah,
unless
yeah.
people are going to know that there is a guy who we can watch, they're not going to get interested.
I remember that as a well, like a 12-year-old or something when he signed for Warwickshire. It was like headline news on a news program. You hardly get that about a player signing for a county on English TV, but it was headline news because he was such a big player, such a
Yeah,
great name, and like you say that he was that flag bearer as well. So that yeah, also, I mean, we're talking about the promotion of Test cricket. It isn't promoted in a way that the franchise leagues are. So it's a bit unfair when they say, "Oh, it's not as popular as franchise leagues." It's because it's not promoted in the same way. I mean, I don't think I don't think the England Sri Lanka series was really promoted that well when it was here. Um, the West Indian one wasn't. They were just lucky that a lot of people had a kind of affection and fondness for the West Indies because they remember them being a really great side when they grew up, and I think for that reason the tickets still sold. Whereas the Sri Lankan one wasn't really. I saw no adverts for it or promotion for it. There might have been, but I didn't see it. Whereas you see adverts for things like the 100 all the time. You don't see it for these tests, and
yeah,
that's another thing they could do, I suppose.
yeah.
Again, I
And
don't know if that changes the whole, if that's enough to change like the decline, but it would help a bit, wouldn't it?
And let's be honest, like, do you think there are people actually in England who are tuning in towards the PSL or the CPL? Are there people who I do not think apart from say the IPL, the
Mm,
BBL, and the top five leagues, franchise leagues, I don't think there's an audience there to watch. Apart from the big nations,
yeah,
are there people watching? I do not really think so. I think it's just the commercial bit, and that's where the media presence comes in.
yeah,
Like if you say the hundred, it's
yeah,
losing money.
yeah.
Lalit Modi put out that thread, so it's not as if the hundred's making money or
No,
it's
no,
it's doing worse than Test cricket actually.
yeah, yeah,
In England, Test cricket is the best product for the nation, and it sustains all of English cricket. I think it's not the same for Australia. I guess for them it's the BBL and
yeah,
partly the Test cricket which sustains it. In India, it's the IPL, but I don't think outside of that the CPL generates a lot of viewership or the PSL is doing enough commercially to do it. The LPL certainly isn't. So it's the Indian audience wherever the Indian
yeah.
audience is going, the leagues being slightly profitable or the bookies are betting. Why are people not betting on Test cricket then? I think that's the main issue we need to address, because if people want to bet on it or money launder it, they can even hold a league in the Cayman Islands.
Yeah. Yeah, David Warner played in that league, didn't he?
Yeah,
Um,
he did.
but well, that's an interesting point because the broadcaster in England, Sky, used to show basically every tour. It doesn't do that anymore. It doesn't show tours to New Zealand anymore. Doesn't show tours to the Caribbean anymore. Doesn't show tours to India. Doesn't show tours to Australia. And it instead just has it has the Big Bash, has the IPL, it has the South African T20 league, and it's replaced the international tours itself. And then there'll be a program on Sky saying, "Oh, why is Test cricket in decline?" Well, you tell us. I mean, you're the ones who are
Yeah.
showing the franchise leagues around the world are not showing England, New Zealand, or England, West Indies, or something. So they're partly to blame as well, I think.
Yeah, so there are two facets to it. are people going to prefer watching SAR 20 over, say, an England tour to Pakistan? Is
Mm.
that the case? Because if that's the case, then no one can blame Sky. Or if
No,
that's not the case, then there's surely got to be some commission or
yeah,
something which incentivizes Sky to show SAR 20 over tests that England are playing.
yeah. That's the thing. I wonder if I wonder if they're reacting purely to demand or they're shaping people's kind of
What do you
views.
think? Like, is there demand for Test cricket in England, for watching England play Test cricket?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's still a demand for that.
Yeah, so I guess
Yeah,
it's there. Then I guess it's just the regulators who are not prioritizing it, and Sky who's not doing a
yeah.
good job there.
It's weird
I
because I know
think,
some of them are on. I've got a different time zone where it's difficult, like New Zealand. You can only watch a couple of hours and you fall asleep. But say the West Indies, it's great. It's like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon in England.
and
When it comes on, it's like perfect time to watch it. But Sky don't show them anymore, so it's a bit disappointing.
yeah, and Jared Kimber was saying this, and he said that Test cricket is a really good product because
Mm.
he was like, he was saying, he made this interesting point that if Test cricket was not making money, then it would not exist right now because no
Yeah,
one is going to, no broadcaster is going to pay for something which does not like make money. So it
yeah,
would not exist as an entity for nations like West Indies or Sri Lanka. So he said he had a conversation with the broadcaster, and the broadcaster said that the boards do not really know how much potential there's in test cricket. We
yeah,
get content for 8 hours, and
yeah,
people who do watch it are tuning in for 8 hours, and we are showing them ads
yeah,
constantly for 8 hours. So that's making them money, but the boards are not able to convince or make their case in front of the broadcaster. So I think it's, at the end of the day, it's just a skill issue for the regulators. It all
yeah,
boils down to there being a power vacuum in cricket.
yeah, yeah. And um,
Two Richards in England.
no, I think that's true. I think there isn't leadership, and it's all a bit muddled. I think really, and I think that's where your calendar comes into it, or a window. It would make things a bit easier and give context to things, and you'd be able to there'd be some excitement, a bit like when there's Wimbledon coming up or whatever.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can argue about the length of the calendar and whatever, but I think it does need to be brought in because at the moment it's very ad hoc, very higgledy piggledy, and uh, it's hard for a youngster to watch cricket now and understand what are the best games,
Yeah.
what series matter,
It's all
what's
too messed up.
yeah, it's just too messed up. If you if you say to a kid now, oh, we've just beaten New Zealand in a two-test series, they'll say, well, what does that mean? And whereas
Yeah.
when I was a kid, if you beat someone, I don't know, beat West Indies in a five-test series, wow, that was like winning a World Cup in a way. It sounds strange now. It must sound strange to youngsters, but that was
Yeah.
like that was seen as like a pinnacle. But now people
Yeah.
just say, oh, but what does that mean? So like they're not being trying to be funny, but they just genuinely think, well, what does it mean? You've won a two-match Test series against New Zealand.
Yeah.
Um,
And
what's the point?
Yeah, and well, I think there's another thing to do with it, and this is apart from the incompetence of the broadcasters or
Yeah,
anything else. I think it's the fact that people have lost attention spans, and let's be
yeah,
honest, that has got to do a lot with this because a lot of people aren't willing to put in 8 hours
yeah,
and watch for the entire day.
yeah.
That's a big thing. Like,
True.
and there's a lot more of football in England. Like, there's
Mm,
the football every time, and it's played in summer as well. I think the Champions League goes on in the summer, so I guess people would prefer 90 minutes over 8 hours. And
yeah.
so I guess we've covered enough of cricket right now. What do you think would WG Grace would do in this situation to save Test cricket,
um, yeah, what would he
just
do?
from a comedic point of view?
I think he just think he needs to bat more. Everyone can go and watch him. I
Yeah,
don't know. I don't know what he'd do to save Test cricket.
hire a cameraman and just take him batting.
Yeah,
Take
yeah,
pictures
just
of
watch
him
him
batting,
batting all
and
day. Yeah,
yeah, and people will watch. So I guess
I read a good book on him. Him and his brother used to um, bring other balls onto the pit into their pocket, and when they'd like show them to the umpire and say, "Look, I caught that," when the ball went in the air. So
wow.
It really was. It was against the spirit of the game, I think. But yeah,
Yeah. So I guess with that we have covered enough on this podcast about the first topic is Test cricket dying. I think we can say that it's not there yet, but in 10 years, if there's not a massive change, then we can both see India, England, and Australia being the only three teams, the big three, which the podcast we've
yeah,
started is named on, are the
mm.
only three nations that are going to remain. So
Yeah. I'd say yeah, you would say that in 10 years' time, if it stays like this, it'll be those three playing a very short amount, a very small amount of Test cricket in a window in between loads of franchise leagues. That would be my tip.
We'd like to know if there's any questions from anyone. You could just send them over to both of our Twitter handles and we'll
Yeah,
address them in the next podcast. And it's going to
yeah,
come, I guess, on every Saturday.
yeah.
For
That'd be great.
yeah.
I mean,
So
and just as a there was one more thing I forgot to cover. Jared Kimber suggested splitting white and red ball cricket. I don't know if anyone is interested in that idea or thinks it's inevitable. I'm kind of sympathetic towards it. So breaking away like you'd break away from rugby union and league. I don't know what
yeah,
people's
and
thoughts are on that. Really, that might be something for people to
yeah,
comment on.
that could completely be plausible because right now there seems to be a concerted effort only towards one spectrum, which is franchise cricket and
Mm,
white ball cricket. And if there's a body which is specifically meant to promote only Test cricket, then I think that would do a lot more for the game. And
yeah,
again, as I said, you cannot have politicians running the ICC. You need to have people who are actually people who have played the game.
yeah.
Say someone like who MS Dhoni. If I
Mr.
think
Yeah,
if he'd be running the ICC, I think he'd do a hundred times better job than what Greg Barkley or Jay Shah would do.
yeah,
So or Owen Morgan for the sake of it, either
yeah,
of those two. So I guess that's something which they could try, and it'd be good. And I think on that I'd add another point, as I've said earlier, Afghanistan, like people
mm,
are avoiding a tour to them, which is not that important. But I think that if there's an interest for cricket somewhere in Afghanistan, there's a lot of interest for cricket. You
yeah,
should not strip them away from the only source of joy which they are getting. And even now they're trying talking of removing that from them. And the leader of the Taliban saying that he'll not allow Test cricket anymore, cricket
yeah,
as a whole anymore. So I think that that should not happen, especially from Australia and England. They
yeah.
should allow them to play. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. If it's a real moral stance that, say, Australia or England are taking, then don't play them in World Cups either.
Yeah,
If it's something you
exactly.
really believe in, then forfeit the points. It's very
Yeah,
weird to say I'm really against it, but I'll play them in the World Cup because I want to get through to the quarterfinals. So you can't say all of a sudden women's rights is so important to me. It's so important I can't play Afghanistan in Test cricket. I'm making a stand, and then say, well, it's important to me, but not as important as getting to the quarterfinals of the World Cup. That's
yeah.
where I draw my line. So if you do really believe in it, don't play them ever. Forfeit your points. I accept that. I don't like the position now where it's kind of they don't play them in
Hypocritical.
bilateral. Yeah, it's hypocritical, and it's like I'll be moral when it's a bilateral series no one cares about, but I won't be moral when it's a World Cup. And I think that that's not a nice way to
And
be. Really.
even if you look at it objectively, I mean, what are you going to gain from not playing them? I guess
Mm,
you're going to put out a point to the world, but at the end of the day, who's suffering from that? It's the Afghan, who common Afghan, who's
yeah,
going to suffer because women are already suffering. And let's be honest that Taliban aren't don't give one dime for
no,
cricket to exist. They
no,
only care about war. So if you're going to remove that, then all it's going to do is remove the suffering from the men, from the suffering. I'm saying the enjoyment, a source of enjoyment from the men there, and that's
yeah.
going to do no good. They're going
And,
to get even angrier and maybe suppress women even more. So it can be counterproductive in a sense, and I don't think it's the right thing to do.
and also, if you look at it, Australia didn't play Afghanistan. They made a stand that they wouldn't play them in these bilateral series,
Yeah,
and then they're celebrating when Maxwell gets a double hundred against them in the World Cup. It was a great double hundred, great game, but it's like well that's it's just a bit funny to me. Is it you that
yeah,
where's your principles now? Oh, they've
yeah,
gone now because you've got
exactly.
double hundred in the in a World
And
Cup.
the
It's
Afghan
strange to me.
and the yeah, and the Afghan refugee team, if you've heard of it, I don't know
Yeah,
that
yeah,
the women's Afghan refugee team, they stay in Australia. So they
Yeah.
were planning to make a team and
Yeah.
represent Afghanistan in women's cricket, but apparently the ICC and even Cricket Australia is not allowing them to do it. So I don't
Oh,
see
that's
like
bad.
where is the moral
Yeah.
line where you're standing. It's very dubious right now.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
when South Africa were banned, they didn't say, "Oh, we won't play you in bilaterals, but we'll play you in World Cups." They were just banned for like 20 or 30 years. That was it. So this is a very peculiar situation we have now with Afghanistan.
yeah. So I guess, do you have anything else to say, or are we
Oh, the one other quick point I read from someone on Twitter. I think it's a
three
guy on
minutes, and
Twitter.
after that this live session will end. So you'll have to, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's just a quick point. Someone was suggesting the decline of Test cricket, that maybe the top three countries stay as countries, and or five, and then there's another Test side built up of like the best of the rest. I don't know what anyone would think about that, if that's plausible.
That could be a thing.
Yeah.
But
Again,
I
it's up.
don't think. But do you see that Pakistan and Sri Lankan fans are going to be excited with
No,
not like
that's the
that's the
drawback,
thing.
isn't it? Because
Yeah,
you wouldn't feel the same passion you would for your country or anything, would you? Because like an
yeah,
amalgamation. It'd be
yeah,
interesting for a viewer, but I don't know.
yeah. For the neutral, it would be good, but for
Yeah,
the fan you're trying to from Pakistan, they're not going to be
no.
invested in that. You could have both of them in the same place. Like you could have a rest of the world 11, which does not happen anymore like they used to
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah,
Everything's gone. The triangular ODI series, which was so popular in Australia and England
yeah,
and even in India,
yeah. They
have
were
stripped
great.
that. So, well, they're trying to remove anything and which is protecting what cricket was and just changing it to a white ball dominated sport, like how we see it in 20 years time. 20 T20
Or maybe,
cricket being more popular and it being the only format that
yeah.
exists.
That'll be when people think of cricket in 10 years' time or something. It will just be that they think of, like a school kid. That to them, that's cricket, just a T20.
And it's like that now, in India. If you're going to go to, like, in my school, people will watch the IPL, but they're not going to watch test cricket, and for them that's the only form of cricket. A guy
Yeah,
was asking me a few days earlier, why do you call test cricket the best format? I don't see why you call that. It's boring, it lasts for 8 hours. I said that unless you watch it for 5 days for 8 hours, I told him it's a bit arduous to watch 5 days, but if you're going to put the time in, you're going to realize the ebb and flow of test cricket cannot be replicated by a 20 over circus. You need a lot of it'll be good, but you'll have to invest the time. So that's the situation in the most followed con- cricket country, India. So
yeah.
I don't see it changing soon. I guess that's a
No.
good note for us to end here.
Yeah, no, that's been great. And yeah, well, yeah, we'll do it again next week then.
Saturday. Yep.
Okay. All right, nice one.